What was happening in the world 10 years ago? So Barack Obama was inaugurated as the 44th president of the US. Our Prime Minister was Gordon Brown, and we were in the midst of the credit crunch. Sully landed his plane on the Hudson and saved all of those lives, and Slumdog Millionaire won the Oscar for Best Picture. So that doesn't really seem that long ago. Well, not to me, it doesn't. And in technology, Facebook was just 4 years old. It had launched in 2014 and was just emerging. And MySpace was considered to be the leading social networking site. Whatever happened to that, eh? Apparently it's still out there. They say they've still got users. And at this time in public health, we were giving little, if any, thought to including digital in our marketing mix. And any website tended to be a bit of an afterthought. So look what's happened since. These social media and digital platforms are now part of the fabric of our lives. We all know all of them, and it's difficult to imagine a day without using them. We apparently spend about 2 hours a day on them, and we get about 5,000 messages a day. And it's really interesting to compare the time taken for these to become part of the mainstream. If you compare it to electricity, that took about 46 years to become mainstream, 26 years for TV, 7 years for the internet, and 5 years for social media. The big story here is also the power shift. Users of Facebook now outstrip by far mainstream print titles. And the landscape is changing, and we're changing alongside it. We're all bombarded with messages, and our attention is divided. Apparently, our average attention span now is down from 12 seconds to 8 seconds, according to Microsoft. So I'll talk quickly, shall I? We're talking more to bots than we are to our partners, although to be fair, Alexa makes much more sense than my husband. And we're stacking and meshing media more than ever before. Across Europe, latest data suggests 67% of us are using another device while simultaneously watching TV. And as I said, 2 hours is the average time we spend on social media platforms per day. By 2020, 90% of adults will have a smartphone, and 75% of households will own a smart TV. And I'm sure nobody here would do anything like this, but apparently nowhere is sacred. So things are changing at an unprecedented rate. The industry's changing, we're changing the way we think and act, and people expect a lot more. So what were things like when I started running health campaigns, which is over a decade ago now? Largely one way. It was all about the broadcast. And we would get out a big TV campaign and a massive press and PR push to persuade people that they should be making a change and possibly get them to sign up for a pack. If we're honest though, the big challenge was measuring a real impact. We had tracking surveys pre and post, so we knew people would tell us if it was working or not, but that was it. We weren't actually any further forward than this quote from Henry Ford in the 1930s. But these days, that's not our problem. So we're awash with tools, technology, and data sources across the whole marketing landscape. The challenge is to exploit all of this intelligently, but not lose sight of what we're trying to do, and to stick to the first principles of behaviour change. In the immortal words of Steve Jobs, we're doing this in 3 words: digital tools, effective use of digital media, digital partnerships, and I'll take you through examples for each of these. Instead of telling people to make a change, which is what we used to do, and a change that they probably aren't that keen to make because it usually involves giving up something that they like, what we can do now is put the tools into people's hands to help them make the change there and then and make them more likely to act. So this is our sugar smart app, the food scanner app. It's solving a really real problem for people when they're shopping. They can tell at a glance by scanning a barcode what's inside the stuff they're buying. There is a huge complexity behind this device, constantly updated data set of hundreds of thousands of products. But what consumers see couldn't be simpler. A stack of sugar cubes telling you what's inside and helping you to make a swap. And people are using it. To date, as of yesterday, over 4.5 million downloads and 54 million scans. And the app is award-winning, including a Webby, which the New York Times is calling the internet's highest honour. So I'm going to show you plenty of films this evening, so you don't just have to listen to me. And we'll start with this one. So these innovations mean that we can also make sure what we're telling people is relevant and useful and in the spaces that they already occupy. We can target people not just according to who they are, but now we can also target by people's actual behaviour through looking at when they're searching, what they're saying and what they're looking for. These techniques have enabled us to reduce campaigns such as our smoking cessation campaign, to reduce the wastage by 80%, because we can specifically target smokers in places where you know we will find them with very direct messaging, whereas we used to run massive broadcast campaigns that targeted the whole population. And another film. Then this wealth of platforms also provides us with the opportunity for partnerships to reach our audience in unique and really genuinely useful ways. And the best example of this is our Alexa Breastfeeding Friend. That's harder to say than you'd think. So we worked with Amazon to launch the government's first Alexa skill. It's the Start4Life Breastfeeding Friend, and it uses voice technology to provide new mothers with tailored NHS-endorsed guidance on breastfeeding, hands-free and 24/7. So anybody that has had a baby or if you look far too young, you don't have enough hands and you need advice all the time. So this skill has received 5-star user ratings and enjoys almost double the average usage time compared to other skills. And it's now the default response to any breastfeeding query received by Alexa. And following this success, the Breastfeeding Friend has now been made available on Google Assistant as well. And here's the third film for you. So those were the 3 examples of developments that we're embracing in our marketing campaigns, and I'd like now to bring you bang up to date and talk you through a very recent campaign which shows how these can work alongside the more traditional channels to deliver an effective behaviour change campaign. And that campaign is the Cervical Screening Saves Lives campaign. So the subject, cervical cancer. So 2,600 women are being diagnosed with cervical cancer each year in England. It's become the second most common cancer for women under the age of 35. And while cervical cancer mortality rates have decreased by up to 70% since the introduction of the screening programme in 1988, every year in England, around 690 women are dying from the disease. That's 2 women dying every day in England. And it shouldn't be the case. It is one of the most preventable cancers due to a simple detection through screening. It's estimated that cervical screening programme saves an estimated 5,000 lives a year in the UK and prevents 70% of cervical cancer deaths. Australia recently announced that they expect to eradicate cervical cancer by 2035. But we have a problem, and you may well have seen in the news recently, cervical screening uptake rates are at a 20-year low, with 1 in 4 women not attending. And we're seeing these stats continue to decline year on year. Figures published by NHS Digital show that in March 2018, the percentage of eligible women, that's those aged 25 to 64, screened adequately was 71.4%, and the standard is 80. We last met that target in 2011, so we needed to make a change. So our campaign objective, very simple, get more eligible women to attend their screening. So our target audience is, as I said, all of these eligible women between the ages of 25 and 64, but we have a particular focus of those in the younger cohort because we have the greatest ability to prevent cancer amongst them, and they are the least likely to attend screening. It's also, if you start them off on the journey of having their first appointment, they'll carry on. We also know there are some groups who are disproportionately less likely to participate, so women from ethnic minorities and lesbian, bi and trans men, yes, who we have targeted with specific content and messaging. So research from our team and from fantastic charities like Joe's Trust have found that women have many personal barriers as to why they may not attend screening. There's embarrassment, the obvious one. Pain, it can be painful for some women. A previous really negative experience, we hear a lot about that women have been once and never again. They believe that cervical cancer has a low prevalence or low risk. They don't really hear about it. They don't know somebody that's had it, so it just doesn't feel personally relevant. Fear of a bad result. So that's largely from not understanding what the test is. And then unaware of the purpose of the test. Limited opportunity to discuss concerns, and a big one, time. Having to make a GP appointment, find time in their working day. The test itself takes 5 minutes, but there's more to it than just that. So all of these tie heavily in this general lack of understanding about the purpose of the test and that perceived lack of personal risk. It's the "it won't happen to me" attitude. We've recently seen a lot of celebrities, so we have Michelle Keegan and Rebecca Vardy, as well as other social influencers, talking about cervical cancer screening and actually even filming themselves going for their screening tests. And during those, we've seen a notable spike in visits to the NHS cervical cancer page. When Michelle Keegan posted on the 11th of November, NHS Choices saw the highest number of hits to that webpage it's ever seen, 12,000. The month before this, to that date, saw only 1,880. So that is the power of an influencer for you. So our messaging framework was quite straightforward. Remind women of the risk, because we think that they've forgotten. Re-educate them about the test itself. So it's to explain that cervical screening is to test for the health of the cervix. It's not a test for cancer. It's to prevent cancer. It detects anything that's pre-cancerous. And to encourage them to attend, so encourage them to protect themselves. So this is our sort of campaign on a page, our comms planning framework. So to reflect the messaging framework, there are 3 pillars to this: reframe, reassure, and convert. And the channel mix, as you can see, uses both traditional broadcast media and a lot of digital channels. So in terms of reframe, this is reminding of the need for screening and what the test is. So it's not a test for cancer. And we use broadcast media here because this is your big message that you need to get out to everyone. And we complemented that with a media partnership, which gives the opportunity for longer form content to explain the full need for the test, what happens. Reassure, so that's addressing those barriers to attendance that I spoke about. So we're using advice, testimonials, and that was delivered through search, through content with influencers, which I'll talk to you about in a bit, and media partnership. And then finally it was to convert, to actually encourage attendance through these digital information and partnerships. So we came up with a campaign identity. Previously our cancer campaigns have always been branded Be Clear on Cancer, but we found that wasn't as relevant for this audience, and particularly where we're talking about prevention rather than spotting symptoms and getting treatment. So what we needed was a brand that would empower women to act for the good of themselves. We wanted the brand to be positive and not use fear to get women to act. It needed to be straightforward with a grown-up tone to engage this audience, and we knew we needed to be positive as well as sensitive to their issues and emotions. We've moved away from the old, somewhat off-putting name of a smear test. That references how the test used to be done, but it isn't any longer, and we talk about cervical screening instead. The NHS branding features, as you can see across these different collaterals, it's invaluable. It has trust, it has authority, it immediately tells people that what you're talking about is free to everyone. Everybody knows what that means. And then finally, the branding had to work across a wide range of formats and communication, including, as you can see here, partnerships material. So, well, we're talking sort of broadly about digital this evening, but there is still absolutely a place for TV advertising when you're putting out such a mass message. And it can still be the most effective way to reach a broad audience. In this case, we're looking at the majority of the female population. It also allows over here amongst their influencers. So we're looking around their friends, their spouses, their children. And it builds an emotional connection and response that's really hard to replicate in other media. So I will show you it.
I'd like to thank my grandma,
my sister,
my lover,
my bestie, my Westie,
my mother.
Thank you for reminding me to go to my cervical screening.
2 women die every day from cervical cancer. But cervical screening can prevent potentially harmful cells developing and stop cancer before it starts. So don't ignore your invite. And if you missed your last cervical screening, book an appointment with your GP practice now.
Fun fact there that actually all the people in there were best friends, mother and daughter, although the Westie was an actor. So while we were deploying broadcast media to get the campaign out to the widest audience possible, we used digital and social media to target specific messaging on the barriers to screening. So we worked with leading creative agency Wavemaker to create public health content with a difference, with the aim of providing messages in pieces of engaging content. So we looked at the content that women were spending time engaging with across social media, like watching vloggers, finding workout routines, hearing real life stories from celebrities, and created something similar, but with the cervical screening message. The set of videos used a different social trend in each of them to address different barriers people have, preventing them from booking their cervical screening appointment. So, our first social trend that we looked at was yoga. So we showed lots of women, we know from our feedback and research that lots of women find the test uncomfortable due to the normal position they're asked to lie in. So we wanted to show women that there are other positions they can be in for their screening test. So we used a yoga style video, and we know that women are looking a lot for content on yoga.
There are a few positions that you can get into to make your cervical screening a bit more comfortable. The simplest is lying on your back with your feet about hip width apart and your knees bent. You can bring your heels to your bum and let your knees relax outwards. You can also lie on the side. That might feel better if you have a tilted uterus, for example. Is that okay? Focus on your breathing or wriggle your toes to distract yourself as the speculum goes in. You can talk to your nurse or doctor about these options at your appointment. And remember, you can stop at any time. This is your screening, and you're in control.
So, I bet you didn't think you were coming here tonight to hear about a tilted uterus, did you? So the next social trend that we looked at was mindfulness, and this is huge. Searches for mindfulness online are increasing by the day. And we matched this to the key barrier of many women not attending their screening due to anxiety. So we pulled together this mindfulness animation to give them a useful way to calm their nerves and help them relax during their screening. Do feel free to join in. Then our next social trend, celebrity reality. Everyone loves a celeb story, especially when it's an embarrassing one. So we use this to talk about the embarrassment of the test, a feeling many women have ahead of their cervical screening, and the lovely Rachel Riley agreed to do this for us.
I was absolutely mortified. And my most embarrassing moment was when I was working on a TV show. The wardrobe lady asked for what I was wearing so she could make it pristine and iron it. I accidentally left an old pair of pants in the trousers. Cervical screening is in no way as embarrassing as that. It can be awkward, but the nurses are trained to make you feel comfortable. They've seen it all before. There's nothing you can show them that's going to shock them. I had an appointment with a nurse. I was in and out within 5 minutes, and I had peace of mind for the next few years. Cervical screening can stop cancer before it starts, so never ignore your invitation to go.
That has been our most popular piece of social content. Then on to our next trend. So Get Ready With Me videos are really huge with it in the influencer sphere. So we created our own to show tips about getting ready for a cervical screening appointment. This particular video was upweighted towards the BAME audience because we know that's an audience that are particularly interested in this type of video.
Morning, guys. So today's the day of my cervical screening. There's a few things I can do today to make my appointment as fuss-free as possible so I can get on with the rest of my day. 2 women die every day from cervical cancer, so I know just how important it is for me to stay on top of my checkups. I know the nurse will have seen thousands of body parts before, so I didn't need to do anything fancy, but it makes me feel good being fresh and clean. So I packed my headphones just in case I want a distraction during the test.
Here is my outfit for today. Wearing a skirt means I won't have to take everything off, just my knickers, and they'll give me a sheet to cover up too.
I'm not doing all this for the nurse. I'm going to be going out with a friend after. I just sent my friend a text to let her know I'm about to go in for my cervical screening. She sent a thumbs up.
And that's my screening all done. It was nothing to stress out about. It took about 5 minutes, I was in and out, and the nurse was so lovely.
Heading off for lunch to meet my friend and celebrate stopping cancer before it starts.
Messaging memes, these are very popular. They use text messages to tell a story. So we produced one that addresses the inconvenience of booking a screening and that concern around having the time, and the other addressing the importance of continuously going despite having clear results in the past. Slightly weird, the idea of getting a message from there, but okay. We've also done a lot of work with a number of social media influencers to get the message out there in an authentic way. We know that familiar names and their own stories play a vital role in persuading people to make positive changes to their health. The approach also allows us to get to those sort of harder to reach audiences with niche messages suited to their particular concerns. So we made sure that those we worked with had a genuine story to tell about their cervical screening, with many actually due an appointment, and therefore sharing their experiences with their followers. So we have at the top right there, this is Fox Fisher. He's a 31-year-old trans man, so has a cervix. He has a following of over 13,000 on his Instagram and YouTube, many of which are from the trans community. And he created a vlog filming the actual cervical screening test that he undertook and providing bespoke messages for trans men who are more likely to ignore their invite or actually not get a letter from their GP inviting them because of the way they're registered on the system. We also worked with Fizzy Peaches, that's her at the bottom left there. She's an influencer with 2 children in a same-sex marriage. Fizzy knew how important cervical screening was and had recently been invited to her next screening test. So Fizzy shared messages with her following both on Instagram and on her blog, reminding and educating women in same-sex relationships that it's still important for them to go for their cervical screening appointment. And then we have our lovely BAME influencer there, Sabina. She's a Muslim mum of 2. She hadn't attended cervical screening before, But having learned about what it was and why it was so important, she agreed to go to her first test and share it with her Instagram followers. So another element is a fantastic partnership that we've engaged with, and it plays into this barrier that we heard about earlier around embarrassment and pain being sort of really key barriers to women attending their cervical screening. In the inverse to this, there seems to be no problem, particularly amongst the younger audience who we know aren't attending, on having an intimate wax. So the bookings of intimate waxing are increasing manifold month upon month, and women are turning up once a month to put themselves through that particular torment. So I'm going to show you a little video here. I really apologise to those of a slightly delicate disposition, but it is funny.
I would love a Hollywood today, please. That'd be great. Just everything off.
Do you mind doing that like heart shape? My boyfriend likes it when I get that done. Is that okay?
Yeah, I've got a lot of embarrassing waxing stories.
Oh, if you want to know the answer to that question.
There was this one time when
You've got to do the back.
Just pull those apart.
and she kind of like went to put her hand and I went to put my hand, so we just had this moment of like meeting eyes.
Have been asked to go on all fours and they end up going pretty much with a microscope onto your hand, pulling out the hairs, leg up in the air.
Awkward positionings. I left halfway. Working with a half wax. The whole experience, I'm like sweating.
What's going on down there?
It's always pretty uncomfortable.
So invasive, but you still do it, everyone.
Last had my cervical screening. Don't think I have, no.
Which is bad because I'm a year overdue.
But also it's just not something that I talk about. I haven't really talked to my friends that much about cervical screening. A little bit of a taboo, I guess.
It's something that I'm not very educated on.
After the screening, very happy that I've done something that was good for my well-being.
It took about 5 minutes.
Now that you mention it, my cervical screening was so easy in comparison to what you're doing right now.
It's not an embarrassing thing looking after yourself.
So using this very key insight, we've partnered with Treatwell. So they're the largest hair and beauty bookings website in Europe, and they work with salons across England. They really wanted to do something to raise awareness in their partner salons about low rates of women attending cervical screening. So the Life Saving Wax campaign is all about harnessing the trusted voice of salons and their staff to help open up the conversation on the importance of cervical screening. We're not asking them to act as medical experts, but they do have the power and the opportunity to increase awareness that cervical screening saves lives. If somebody's willing to get that intimate with their beautician, it's a really key moment to have that conversation. So we're working with Treatwell to provide up to 500 salons across the country with training and resources, which has all been funded by Treatwell. This has been a no-cost partnership to us to help them have these conversations. The beauty of a partnership is this, well, like this as well, is that we can say things in a different way, in a way that resonates more with that younger audience that actually as Public Health England, as you've seen that film, we can't say in our own voice. It's their voice. So the partner salons have been provided with account manager training materials, including a video, which I'll show you in a second, to train all staff members on how to speak about the issue. They've been taught to ask, did you see the posters when you came in today? Have you been before? I've been before, it's not scary, it's not painful. There's posters in the salons, there's window stickers, there's social assets and cards for clients to take away, and Treatwell are actually also funding some digital advertising as well. So this is the film that is being shown to their beauticians, very short and sweet, but gets the point across. So they're not supposed to be medical experts, they're just supposed to open the conversation. And it's hosted by one of our lovely media medics, Dr. Zoe.
2 lives are lost to cervical cancer every day, but cervical screening can stop cancer before it even starts. However, the number of women attending their cervical screening appointment is at a 20-year low. Research has found that women are not attending their screening appointments due to busy lifestyles, fear of pain or discomfort, or embarrassment. We must change this. We need to start the conversation around the importance of cervical screening. According to Treatwell data, more and more women are attending their salons for intimate waxing, and it doesn't seem that the same barriers apply there. So let's use this as an opportunity. Treatwell and Public Health England have come together to develop Life-Saving Wax. Life-Saving Wax is all around using that unique relationship between beauticians and clients to open up the conversation around the importance of cervical screening. So how do you find it having these conversations about cervical screening whilst women are having their treatments?
Well, the treatment room is a safe place. Us beauty experts tend to talk about all sorts. You'll be surprised where the conversation can lead to. Whilst we're no medical experts, we do have the opportunity to start an honest and open conversation about a topic that us women don't talk enough about, and that's the importance of cervical screening.
So Aisha, tell me what happened when you went for your screening test.
So I had my screening test done last summer, and unfortunately the test results came back that I had abnormal results.
Were you worried by that?
At first, yes, but then the more research I'd done, and by the time I spoke to the gynaecologist, I was put at ease because the cells had been found before they became cancerous.
If we can all have more conversations and be more open about cervical screening, we can break down some of the barriers that stop women from attending.
So we had a fantastic launch event for this partnership a few weeks ago, and it was just really lovely because it was a very female room. We had Dr. Zoe, we had the salon owner there, Aisha, our case study, sort of taking panel discussion, and it was a really fantastic open discussion, and it got great coverage across social media influencers that were invited. We also made it onto BBC Breakfast that day, which was quite surprising, so it was quite a busy news day, what with that Brexit thing going on. So it's been really well received, and we're hoping that it will make a huge difference and hopefully expand even further across the Treatwell brand. So finally, the most important, arguably, question is how are we evaluating it all? So we're lucky in these campaigns because we actually have clinical data that we can look at. It's not always as easy to source as you would think, being a public health agency. But we are able to look at the number of screening tests that are completed during the campaign period, so uptake and coverage, number of samples tested, and the number of referrals that are then ongoing. And we can compare that sort of year on year to see if we've seen a genuine uplift as a result of the campaign. Then also we'll be doing pre to post panel survey to get a self-reported read on campaign awareness and recognition, standout, the changes in knowledge and attitudes towards screening, agreement with relevance of the advertising, and also claimed screening attendance or intention to attend. Also relevance, is it becoming more personally relevant to the women? And obviously alongside this we look at in-campaign metrics alongside our social media, and obviously upweight things that are doing better than others and retarget towards women that have not yet engaged. So that is a trot through the campaign and leads me very neatly on to any questions.